This is Gemara and Eruvin Daf Pei. Tonight's shir should be as chus for Shlema for Yidamir ben Yakir, Meni ben Vecha, Imam Chanita, Chaim ben Sar, Shalom Simon Reizid, Dol Sar Bas Kenid, Batim Bas Chayser, Yischem Sarazi, Yisrael ben Nidal, Yisrael Bas Shalei, Shalom Bas Navi, Shavei Shichana, Fadav ben Yitariva, the name of Chana Rizal, Yisrael Chaim ben Yehud, Yisrael Shachai Yisrael. We pick it up from the top of Peyamid Aleph. We pulled up actually a few words too short. I apologize. We just finished saying two different reasons how you know when you see a particular item that it's going to be an Asherah tree. And when the second reason the Gemara said at the top of Peyamid Aleph was Shmuel, that Shmuel said that when you see Hani Tamri L'Shechri, the Chinatzerfi, the Shasle B'Yom Chagam, that they're saving these certain dates to make juices for the day of their Chag, the day of their holiday for the Avodah Zarah. That's the part that we didn't finish. I apologize. They said that the second reason of Shmuel is the correct reason. So Meisvei says the Gemara, 4 lines from the top, Daf Peyamid Aleph. Ketzad mishtativ mavus. We said in the Mishnah, how do you create a sheet of mivuos? Meviyim chavish al yayin. You bring a barrel of wine, vishal shemen, or of oil, vishal tamarim, or of dates, vishal gregorus, of dried figs, shalsharmine peiros, or any other fruits. If they're your own fruits, your own figs, your own items, sarach lizchais, then you have to be mezaki, you have to give them rights to everyone else who's being part of your ear. If it's from everyone else, you have to tell them, I took your fruit, we're creating an Eruv. Again, we're creating a sheet of mivois, everyone's going to partner together. So if it's all my items, I have to give up my rights to everyone. If it's someone else's, I got to tell him, I took his item to create the Eruv. And then the Brisa concludes, and this is the part that's a kasha, this is the question, how much you have to pick it up? A mashu. What's the question? The question is that the Mishnah a moment ago taught us, not the Mishnah, I'm sorry, the Gemara, the Sabbath Badisa taught us at the start of the Gemara, the Ayin Testament Bees, what did it say? A tefach. Here you see how much? A mashu, only a little bit. Answers the Gemara, my mashu, what does it mean a little bit? Nami dikamar tefach. It means a tefach. Again, a little bit lav davka, but that is the taret, so there's no question how much you have to pick up this barrel. A tefach. Says the Gemara Itmar. We learned as follows. Sheet of mivuais. We're partnering all the different mivuais. Again, let's just remind ourselves one more time. Houses, multiple houses into chatzeros, multiple chatzeros into the mavui. So all these different people, these houses, these chatzeros are partnering together to carry inside this mavui. Sheet of mivuais. Rav Amar ein sarich lischais. Shmuel Amar sarich lischais. What is the din? Does each and every person have to be mezakeh in this Eruv? Does each and every person have to have a partnership in here or not? Machlekes Rav and Shmuel when it comes to shitof mivuos, Eruvei techumim. When it comes to creating an Eruv techumim, that's when we put down the items, we can walk 2,000 amos. Rav Amar sarach l'schos, Shmuel ain't sarach. The exact opposite. In this case, Rav says you have to be mezakeh, everyone has to have an ownership. But Shmuel says not. Again, Rav and Shmuel just flip teams. Says the Gemara. According to Shmuel, it makes a lot of sense. What did Shmuel say? Shmuel said that by Eruv Techumim, you do not have to be mezakeh to everyone else. But by Shita Mivuais, you have to. Says the Gemara, I understand that. Our Mishnah was what? Shita Mivuais. So according to Shmuel, Shita Mivuais, you have to be mezakeh, like our Mishnah says it. Eruv Techumim, did our Mishnah say anything? The answer is no. You don't have to be mezakeh. Says the Gemara, I understand Shmuel a lot. El Rav, but according to Rav, my taima. What's Rav's reasoning? Why does Rav say about Eruv Chatziris? Yes, but Shita Mivuais. No, says the Gemara, Tanai. In truth, it's Machlekes Tanaim. The Amar Rav Yudah, Rav says Rav Yudah, the name of Rav. Maisa Bikal Lasa Shal Rabbi Yoshia. There was a story with the daughter-in-law of Rav Yoshia. She went to the bathhouse. V'chashkolai. She went to the bathhouse on Erev Shabbos, and then she got there a little bit late. All of a sudden, v'chashkolai. It turned too dark. And the story over here is that the bathhouse, Rashi explains, was chutz l'tzchok. So all of a sudden, the daughter-in-law of Rav Yoshia is sitting there, and she's stuck outside the tzchom and now it's Shabbos. What happened? The Eruv la chamayisa. Her mother-in-law made the Eruv for her. Her father-in-law, what did they do? Rav Aishia went and he created the Eruv Techumim so she could come back home. So again, the point is they created it for her. Uba ma'isa lefnei Rav Chia. They told Rav Chia over the story that she got stuck in the bathhouse, and he went and he created the Chumim Ba'asar. Rav Chia said, "You're not allowed to do that." So seemingly we have a machlekes here whether you're allowed to create an Eruv Chumim on behalf of someone else. Rav Aisha obviously held yes. That's why he did it? Rav Chia held no. So the Gemara is answering, we wanted to know, who is this Rav? How did Rav know that by Erev Chatziris? No, but Erev Techumim, yes, but Erev Chatziris, no. Shita Muvos, no. Sorry about that. Says the Gemara, it's Machlekes Tanayim. It's Machlekes Tanayim that we see when it comes to, again, by Erev Techumim, we had this story whether it was allowed. Amar le Rav Yishmael Rav Yesi comes to Rav Yishmael Rav Yesi beBeloi kach ata machmer beEruvin kach Amar le Rav Yishmael Rav Yesi beBeloi kol kach ata machmer beEruvin. You're being so machmer. Why are you being so machmer that you have to be mezakeh for someone else? Kach Amar Abba. This is what my father taught me. Kol sheishcha beEruvin hakel. You should be mekel by Eruvin. So why are you being so machmer? And that was the end of that story. And he felt that it was not that you were allowed to be makna the Erev on behalf of her, and that's the reason why it yes worked. So again, we're concluding that we have a machlokes tanoim, whether when it comes to techumim, whether you're able to do it on behalf of someone else, can you be mizakeh for someone else? V'bailu, and then they asked the following question: Mishal chamaisa irvala umishom deloi zichsala. What was the reason? Again, back in that story, why did it not work? Rav Chia said it didn't work. Why wouldn't it work? Was it because Mishal Chamoisa Irvala, when they created this Erev Techumim, when they put down the bottle of wine, the loaf of bread, it was from his own stuff, Umishuk and it doesn't work. Why not? Because he did not give it over to her. She is the one stuck in the bathhouse that needs the Erev, and he never was mizakeh. He did not acquire it on her behalf. Is that the reason it doesn't work? Or perhaps the reason is Mishalah Irvala. He took her stuff and made it as an Erev. He did not tell her about it. So the Gemara wants to know, what would the reason be? The Erev would not be good. We have two options. Either the reason would be, number one, because it was his own items and he had to be mezakeh, he had to be makne, he had to give it over to her, and he did not. Or option number two is that he took her stuff and she did not know about it. Amr Lahan, he responded, Ahumi Rabbanim Rav Yaakov Shemei, and his name was Rav Yaakov Ledim Mavarshli Minei. To me, it was explained, Dear Rav Yochanan, 2 lines before the wide lines. Mishal Chamaisa Irva, it was from his own stuff, and what was the reason it was no good? Because he did not give her to her. So that's what the Gemara is concluding, that the reason it was no good is because he had to give her the rights, and he did not. Amarli Rav Zir Rav Yaakov, Brei Debas Yaakov, Kimatas La'asam, Okif Vizil L'Sulmi Desur. Go to this place called Sulmi Desur, and what should you do there? Ubai Minei Rav Yaakov. And you should ask from Rav Yaakov. We are on the second wide line, Bar Idi. That question, this story, the Gemara is still trying to figure out what's going on over here. So he said, when you go to Silmer, the story, you should ask from Yaakov or Idi, what should they do in this story? She's stuck in the bathhouse. We got to get her back home. What should they do? So, and therefore, and the reason it didn't work was why? Because they did not give it over to her. She did not know about it. Omer Le, the same answer that we said before. So again, another story proving the point that the issue here was that they were not makneh this Erev Techumim to her. Omer Rav Nachman Naktina, and the following we learned, Echad Erev Techumim, whether it's Erev Techumim, Echad Erev Chatzeros, whether it's Erev Chatzeros, Echad Shita Mevois, or whether it's a partnership of an Amavoy, Sarich Lizkais, that you have to give it over. Like we just saw a moment ago, that the whole issue about this Erev Techumim was they did not give it over. So again, let's just get the chronological order of the Gemara. The Gemara began that we had a machlekes Rav and Shmuel, whether there was a difference between Erev Chatzeros and Shita Mevois. Shmuel seemingly went with our Mishnah that Shita Mevois needed to be mezakeh. Erev Techumim did not. Rav said the opposite. Erev Techumim did yes. Shita Mevois did no. The Gemara said, where did Rav get this din from? The Gemara answers machlekes Tanaim. Then the Gemara went in to prove the machlekes Tanaim was this whole story that she got stuck in the bathhouse. And then the Gemara said, so why didn't it work? Why did Rav Chia say it was no good? Answers the Gemara 2 different times from 2 different people was because he should have been mezakit or and did not. And now the Gemara is concluding, says Rav Nachman La'alacha Naktina, what should you do? In all these cases, Erev Techumim, Erev Chatzeros, Shita Mevois, in all these cases you have to be mezakit to the person that needs the Erev, needs the Shita, and needs the Erev Techumim. Okay? Once we're on the topic of who we have to give away the Eruv for, 6 lines into the wide lines. What about Eruv Tavshilin? If you're again, let's just be clear here. It's when you're making an Eruv Tavshilin for someone else. We know Eruv Tavshilin is able for one to permit to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbos, which generally not allowed. But if you did an Eruv Tavshilin, then you're yes allowed. So it says the Gemara, if I'm making Eruv Tavshilin on someone else's behalf, do I have to be mezakeh? Do I have to be kained for him or not? Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yosef, my tabai. What's your question? Lo shemile Adam Rav Nachman bar Adam or Shmuel Eruv Tavshilin Sarach Lizkais, which says explicitly you have to be mezakeh on behalf of that person, and that is the answer. Says the Gemara, obviously he didn't hear. If I ask you a question, what's the din? And you answer, oh, you didn't hear? Of course not, or else I would have asked you the question. So says Abaye, what was the question? By Eruv Techumen, did Shmuel not say that you do not have to be Zoychene, you don't have to give it over? And he himself holds sarach lechais, so he wanted to know. Maybe it's like Eruv Tchumim. Says Gemara, Hachi Ashta. What are you talking about? Bishlama Hasam by Eruv Tchumim. Pli Ravu Shmuel. It was a machlekes, like we started off at the top of the Amid. V'kamash Malon, and we had to come along and teach us Kechumen Demar, Kechumen Demar, that we're going Chumras both ways. That's why Rav Nachman had come along, and that's why he had to teach us over here. Naktina, and that what? Erev Techumen, Erev Tavshilin. You have to be mezakit, but Avalacha. But in our case of Erev Tavshilin, he said the Shmiele Mika Demanda Polig. If you would have heard about it, was anyone that argued? Sumar is a bit bothered that what was the whole discussion over here. Of course, he should have known that you guys have to be mezakit. Just to point out, this is talking about again an Eruv Tavshilin that you're making on behalf of someone else. But if you're making Eruv Tavshilin for yourself, you do not have to be mizakit. Again, what is mizakit? Let's remind yourself. That was the Mishnah from yesterday. That if I want to make an Eruv on behalf of someone else, what do I have to do? I have to go and I have to give the Eruv to my wife, to my daughter who's a gadol, to my sons who gadol, or to someone else. We said an Eruvin, a shivcha. We have to, that's a Jew. We have to give it over to someone else, and they make a kinyan. They acquire it on their behalf. So that's going to be like the case when the Rav makes the Eruv Tavshilin. We all know that the Rav makes it on behalf of everyone, so that if one forgets, once in his life, once in whatever discussion, but if someone forgets, he can rely on the Eruv of the Rav. That's only going to work if the Rav was mizakit on behalf of someone else. And therefore, what the Rav does is, and I think some of the Siddurim even have the nusach in parentheses for the Rav, what he does is he gives over the Eruv Tavshilin, the egg, the matzah, the piece of fish, whatever it is, to someone, his son, who's a gadol, his wife, etc., to be kind to acquire it on behalf of anyone who potentially will need it. Says the Gemara a bunch of stories. Ahutar Zina, a certain soldier who guarded the weapons, the Ubishavisa de Rav Zera, that was in the neighborhood of Rav Zera, Amrle, Agir Law and Rishusach. Rent us your Rishus, Loy Agir he didn't rent it. Also, we had the Rav Zera, Amrle, they said to him, Maula Megar Midivisu, he didn't rent his Rishus. And now we have an issue. We know that any time you want to make an Erev Chatirish, you do a voice on these cases, everyone has to participate. But he did not participate. So can we rent it from his wife? A little bit, you want to go behind his back. He didn't rent it, you want to go to his wife. Amar le, he responded, Hachi Amar Ishlak Mishmei the Gavra Rabba. And who is this Gavra Rabba? Who is this great person? Uman Rav Chanina. Ishtoi Shalada Ma'arba Shleimet Haitoi. She's allowed to make an ear without his consent. And as we'll see, the pashtus is because it's for his own good. Because now he's only gaining from this, and therefore you can go ask the wife to participate in the Eruv, to rent away the Rishus for the sake that everyone can be involved in this Eruv. Says the Gemara another story. Ahutar Zina David B'Shavis the Rav Yehuda soldier in the neighborhood of Rav Yehuda bar Oishia. Amrle Agulam Rishuzach Lo Agulu, he didn't rent it. Also, the Rav Yehuda bar Oishia. The kid from Rav Yehuda bar Oishia. Amrle Maula make him with the Visukhi rented from his wife. Lo Yavi B'Yadi, he didn't have an answer. Also, the Rav Masna Lo B'Yadi. Rav Masna didn't have an answer. Also, the Rav Yehuda. Amrlu Achi Amar Shmuel. This is what we learn from Shmuel. Ishal Adam Ma'arevish Leimi Daita. She's allowed to create an Eruvin without his consent, and therefore you could go and rent the area from the wife, and then everyone will have no issues. So Meisvei. So what did we just learn? We just learned two different stories that a woman's allowed to participate in the Eruv on her husband's behalf without his consent. Meisvei. Ask the Gemara 6 lines from the bottom. Noshim she'eruvu. Woman that created an Eruv in Ishtatu or made a sheet of avois. Shaloi midas ba'elehem without their husband's consent. Ein Eruvin Erev, ein Shitufan Shituf, and the partnership doesn't work. So what's going on? You just told me she's allowed to make without her husband's consent. We see clearly in the Brisa not that way. Answers the Gemara like Kasha, not a question. Hada Asar, Hadli Asar. One is when the lack of participation will forbid them in the Erev, and one is when it will not. As you see up in Rashi towards the end of the narrow lines, a little bit higher in the Amid, says, Hada Asar, al b'nei mavoi, then loy bin andaite. If he's going to mess everyone else up, that by him not participating, no one can carry that mavoi, then the wife could give over the rights for her husband. Umas nisam, when it said he cannot, the braysa mitaloy asar going, for example, chatzah shem b'nei mavuais, Shnei Mavais, a Chazar between two Mavais, or Gila Imzav, Imzad, and therefore only one of them was normally walked there, case that we had before. In that case, then she cannot do it. So again, when it's going to mess people up, she could, yes, participate. Says the Gemara, this is logical, Dim Kain, because if not, Kasha the Shmuel. If this wasn't the answer, that it depends whether you would mess everyone up, we'd have a stira, a contradiction in Shmuel. Damar Shmuel, 3 lines on the bottom, Echad Mavui. Let's say you have people in the Mavi that normally participate in the Shita Mavois. In B'nai Mavi. And then one time they make a Shita, one time they make a partnership, that person didn't get involved. What's the halacha? If 1 week all of a sudden he's not around, go enter in his house and take away challah, take away some food against his will. Ragil in, she'in ragiloi shmami nos. What's the raya? It said only someone who's normal to be involved in the shita mevois. So we see that it's only when someone is normal, because that's a person that potentially will aser if he does not even get involved in the Erev, and that's the reason why he's going to be allowed to take it against his will. So too, we're bringing to us that a woman will be allowed to give over the rights for a husband in a case that the lack of participation would have forbade everyone else in that chutzner. Says the Gemara, let's bring a raya to this concept of Shmuel. Leima misalei, and the last line, let's bring a raya. If you have a mavui, we know that in order to permit a mavui at the entrance, but either lechi, a vertical beam, or a mav, or a kaira, horizontal beam. So let's say a case where someone does in kaifin, we force someone to do it. Moving along to Bayam and Bays. So what do we think that's a raya that what? That's a raya that you can force someone to be participating in the Erev. Because if you don't make the lacher, the kaira is going to forbid everyone from carrying. Says the Gemara, no raya. Shani asam the like a mechitzais. In that case, there are no mechitzais. And that's the reason why, as Rashi says, so the lecher, the kaira, is creating the fourth wall, and thereby it creates the area as a guarded area. There's a whole open wall. But a lecher and a kaira will be guarded. It'll be a makim shamar. That's why you allowed to force them to make that erev. Lishna achrina mitzad shani. That's a girsa, a whole fight over here. And just before we continue, let's just point out the Ritzvah's question, an obvious question. I don't understand. To put up a lechi and a kaira makes the mavui more guarded. I have a mavui; it's missing the whole front wall. So I put up a vertical beam. I put up a horizontal beam. Now the area is guarded. What are you talking about? It's still wide open. It's a halachic wall. That's Ritzvah's kasha. But again, that is how Rashi learns it. It's in the Tab Rashi v'inach l'shamrai that Rashi is learning that it makes it more guarded. Says Gemara, Rashi Amar, second line, lechi ashera. You're allowed to make a lechi, a vertical beam out of an ashera tree, even though an ashera tree you're not allowed to get a benefit, you're not allowed to get enough from it. You're still allowed to use it for a lechi. As Rashi says, there's no shear for a lechi. Lechi can be even a little bit. So an ashera tree is considered to be burnt, considered to be destroyed, because that's what you have to do. You still can use it as a lechi. Can you make a kaira, a horizontal beam out of this ashira, out of this avodah zarah tree? Says the Gemara, Mandamar kaira kolshkin lechi. Certainly a lechi. So a kaira has a shear, as we've learned at the beginning of the Masechta. Has to be a tefach, has to be able to hold a brick, mekabel riach, has to be strong enough to hold a brick, so it has a shear, and yet you could do it, certainly a lechi. However, Mandamar lechi, aval kaira loy, why? Ketuti mitach shiri, the fact that this ashira tree has to be destroyed makes it as if there is no shear, and since a kaira needs to have a shear, it needs to be big and strong enough to hold a brick, therefore will not be able to work as a kaira according to that man Amar. Says the Mishnah Be'emir Beis, if you made an Erev, how much food do you need? We'll see in a moment. But you had the requisite amount of food for this Erev, and then someone eats it on Shabbos, so you don't have enough oichel, you don't have enough food. The next Shabbos, you add in food to the coffer, you add in food to the pot, and you don't have to tell everyone that they added in food. Nitaisvu aleya, and let's say more people moved into the mavui, so now there's not enough food for everyone. Moisef, you have to add on umizaka, and you give them rights to Sarch L'Idiyah, and you have to tell them, Kama Shir, and what is the shear? We keep on saying if the shear diminishes. What is the shear? Bisman Shein Merubin, when there's a lot of people in the Mavui, the Gemara is going to explain what that is. Mazayin Shtei Sudais. You have to have 2 meals worth of food in the entire Mavui, then that everyone partakes. L'kulam Bisman Shein Muadim is not so many people can grow it's like a dried fig. L'chol echad v'echad of each and every person. When you're creating the formation of the Eruv, but once it's created, and now you're just sustaining the Eruv, you're keeping the dream alive each and every subsequent leak, kol shu, any little bit is enough. Like as the Tinoikais kanta that we see in that Eruv Chatziris, once you made a sheet of voice, but in reality they're all partners. Again, houses Chatziris Mavui. All these Chatziris are all partners in this Mavui, which means all the houses are partners together. So why do they have to go and make our own private sheet Eruv Chatziris? So that the children don't forget when they don't see Eruv Chatziris, they don't think that there's no such creation at all. Just point out that there is a bit of an irony in the Mishnah. Don't think we read it wrong. The Mishnah said that when there's a lot of people, 2 meals worth for everyone suffices. When there's not so many people, then you need a gregorous for each and every person. Sounds a little bit backwards. The Gemara will explain. Says the Gemara, Mayaskina, what's the case? If there's one type of food in this Eruv, Ma'ariv Nismait. Why does the Mishnah say that when the Eruv is Nismait, doesn't have enough food, then you let it add in without telling people? Afilu Kolanami, even if it was diminished entirely, you let it add on without telling people. Elo, what the case must be, b'shnei minim, that there's 2 types of food, 2 separate foods, meaning the first type of food was destroyed, nothing left, now you're adding in a different food. And then what? Then the din is you have to tell everyone you're putting a different food into the Eruv. So even when it gets diminished, it does not work unless you tell them when you're putting in a different food. Let's say there was challah. Now you're putting in a different type of food for this Eruv. You have to tell them. The tiny, like we learned in the Brisa. If there's one type of food in this Eruv and challah was completely depleted, if it's one food, you let her replenish it. Says the Gemara, one of 2 answers. Either you could say really it was the same item, or you could say it was a different item. It means that it was completely destroyed, there's nothing left. And by 2 meaning, when it got diminished, you will be able to replenish it only when it's kala, only when it's fully depleted entirely. That's when you'll have to tell them. Those are the 2 ways in learning the Mishnah. We continue by the 2 dots in the second half of the Amud. We said that if more people move into the Amavui, then you add in food to the Eruv and you have to tell them about it. This is where we see that they argued on Rav Yehuda. The Tanan, like we learned in the Mishnah. This whole din that you have a shear, how much food you have to have, is by Eruv Techumim. But when everyone's getting together in the Chatzar, says a Rav Yehuda, by Eruv Chatziros, you don't need any das. So that's not like our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah it's at Eruv Chatziros, you do have to tell them at certain times. Says the Gemara, again, look at what were the first words. Or Shizvi said in the name of Rav Chisda, Zoi Saimeres. From here we see it argues on Rav Yehuda. Says the Gemara, Pshita the Chalukin. Of course they argue. It's not like the Mishnah. That means he argues on the Mishnah. What Zoi Saimeres? This is where we see that they argue. Says the Gemara, I would have thought this whole din is when there's one chatzar with 2 mavuis. When it's one chatzar with 1 mavui, I would have thought maybe this din is not true. And maybe when it's 1 chatzar with 1 mavui, then this din of Rav Yehuda that says you always have to tell them does not exist. Kamash Malon, that our Mishnah argues on Rav Yehuda. The Rav Yehuda holds in all cases you don't have to tell them, even when it's 1 mavui and 1 chatzar. And our Mishnah says you have to tell them. Says the Gemara, Kami Yushura. How much is the shear? So we said if there's a lot of people, then you need 2 meals worth. If there's not so many people, then it suffices with a dried fig. Says the Gemara, Kamu Merubin. What is a lot? 10, 20, 100, a million. What's a lot of people? Amar Rav Yehuda, 18 people. Shemani Asar V'Sulo, just 18. But if it's 20, then it's not. Again, when there's a lot of people, you just have to have 2 meals worth for everyone. If there's not a lot of people, then each and every person needs a gregorious worth. So when there's 18 people, it sounds like, then you need 2 meals worth. If there's 17 people, then each one of those 17 needs to have a dried fig's worth. Says the Gemara, what if there's 20? So 18 V'Sulai, Ema Mishane Esrei Ve'elach. No, from 18 and up, then it suffices with 2 meals for everyone. Says the Gemara, okay, great. What's 18? It's a very funny number. We know the number of 10. What's 18? My father explained, anytime you would split up the 2 meals worth, and there would not be enough that each person gets the Gregorites, Eruvin, that's when there's a lot of people. Meaning, when you have 17 people and everyone gets one dried fig, if you add it all together, it does not even equal the amount of 2 meals worth. But once you have 18 people, then 2 figs, the dried fig, 18 dried figs equals 2 meals. That's why the number is 18. So from 18 and up, well, what do you need if each and every person needed a dried fig? Let's say 25 people. It would be more than 2 meals. So we take the lower number and we say it's enough with 2 meals worth. Visagi b'mazon sheisuda is different. Suffices when you have 2 meals worth, even though in order to give each and every person a dried fig, it should really be more than 2 meals. Vilay mu'atin, less than that is considered a small amount of people, then you need dried figs for each and every one. You know what it's teaching you? 2 meals worth is 18 dried figs, and that's the reason why once you have more than 18 people, which would be 19 dried figs, and you don't need that, you go with the more kula dik, and therefore it would suffice with 2 meals worth. Pick it up 10.